Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with us today. The ARC of California is thrilled to offer Caring Futures, a proven resource program dedicated to supporting caregivers and family members of adults with disabilities. Understanding the unique challenges faced by family caregivers as they age, Caring Futures offers critical planning assistance, resources, and a supportive community. Caring Conversations is just one part of Caring Futures program here at the ARC of California. We will share more about our other offerings by Caring Futures at the end of today's conversation, so please stay tuned. As you see, we have ASL interpretation for our discussion today. You can turn on closed captioning by clicking the button in the bar below. At the end of today's conversation, there will be a question and answer session. At that time, we'll invite you to raise your hand or type your question in the Q&A to ask our guest directly. Hello, everyone. My name is Felisa Strickland. I am a proud sole parent caregiver for my daughter, Lily. Lily is 24 years old. She has a diagnosis of cerebral palsy, autism, epilepsy, and IDD, and she requires full-time care. We enjoy our life and live in Santa Barbara, California. Alongside full-time caregiver, I am a strong advocate for individuals with disabilities. I serve as a board member for the ARC of California, as well as Alpha Resource Center of Santa Barbara. I also participate in many committees and enjoy getting involved in fundraisers and advocacy projects in our community. As a Caring Futures instructor and parent educator, I am thrilled to be here for this important conversation with you and our special guest. Today's topic is using family therapy to navigate big life changes, your role as a caregiver for a family member with disabilities. Joining us today to talk about this important topic is Jeanne White. For over 25 years, Jeanne has worked with families and their children to help them achieve their highest developmental and emotional outcomes. Jeanne is a licensed marriage and family therapist who also worked in private practice and worked with child development specialist teams providing services to neurodivergent children and their families. Jeanne is the owner and president of the Center of Developmental Play and Learning, which has been around since 2007. Jeanne is also an assistant faculty through Perfectum with expertise in the DIR floor time model of therapy. Currently, Jeanne is also in her third year of doctoral studies at Rhys Davis Graduate Institute in Los Angeles, working towards a doctorate in clinical psychology for children and adolescents. Without further ado, please welcome Jeanne. Good morning, Jeanne. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, Felisa. It's so good to be with you.
We're so happy to get started with this conversation. I have been waiting for this one. I think this is a really, really important topic, and I think our families will really, really love the valuable information you're going to share with us today. Before we get started with our conversation, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and maybe what motivated you to get into a career as a family therapist?
Oh, yes, sure. Well, thank you for having me. My life's work, I was on track to become a licensed marriage and family therapist, which I am now. But I was an early start mom unexpectedly. And so back in 2000, I had people coming across the threshold for speech, for OT, for play. And my son's therapist, this brilliant woman, Patricia Marquardt, was reading about Greenspan's DIR floor time model. And she handed me the book and she said, "Do you want to read about this?" And I said, "Sure." And so that started to roll me into this whole career of learning about DIR floor time. I also had this brilliant OT named Chris Pilkington, a mentor of mine, who taught me so much about the body and motor planning and sensory. So this became a passion. And Pat and I opened the Center for Developmental Play and Learning in 2007. And that's kind of how this all started 18 years ago. Yeah.
Isn't it fascinating how becoming a parent of a neurodivergent child or a child with disabilities thrusts you into all different kinds of new things, right? For me, it's been advocacy, and not only advocating for Lily, but advocating for others as well, and realizing that we're all part of a bigger a bigger equation, right? What would you say to families or caregivers thinking about therapy, but are not sure if it's possible due to difference in, say, communication or disabilities within the family? Are there ways to evaluate what types of therapies are offered and what's the best fit for someone?
It's a really great question. Thank you for asking it. And, I think one of the new trends that we're seeing is that more, as we notice that there are differences in communication and sensory and registration and processing, there are feeling states in the individuals with those differences. And so we think that one way to answer your question is it's really important to have mental health clinicians who have some training in developmental work. A mental health clinician who has been an early start home visitor or who has been a floor timer or some other type of developmental therapist will, no matter what they end up doing as a future psychotherapist, they will have a grounding in all of these differences, which we all have. They're just along a continuum. The other thing that I think is really important is to establish a relationship with a therapist where you feel you and your family and your child are known and understood. And that ties with what I just said. So the clinician should have some idea of what your family has been through with the home visiting and what that therapy looked like in the home and what you're dealing with now. So I think it's really important to sit with a therapist who has some sense of what that work looks like. And so when you have somebody that needs support who has a different language system, who uses an AAC, who has postural challenges, or you need to think about the lighting in your room where you meet for sensory issues, that all of this is understood by your clinician. And our agency is passionate about training mental health clinicians in these ways. So I
Yeah,
think
I mean it's yeah, that no, that's really, really helpful information. And one thing that comes to mind when listening to that is it's clearly not a one size fits all situation, right? You can't just, and a lot of times when I take Lily to the doctor for whatever the purpose, I always feel that way. Like I feel like I'm always trying to accommodate the environment for her, because there are sometimes too much stimuli everywhere around, and it can be, it can be upsetting or challenging for us to navigate. So yeah, thank you. That's really great insight to put out there. So we talked about finding a qualified, experienced person. So that part's important. If a parent or a caregiver or a person with disabilities is considering therapy, what is the best way to seek out the right therapist? Do you have any recommendations on how to go about researching this and what to look for? And I'm curious about if there are resource lists, like for example, a list of
Mhm.
specialists in that particular area that families could access.
Um, yeah, well, I think that we're going to be building that resource list that you're talking about because I agree with you. The demand is so big and so great. And I want to make sure that families have some ideas of where they could go.
Mm-hmm.
The way that I thought about your question was I think the first in my way of thinking, the first priority would be to find an agency that uses neurodiverse affirming language, which means that they affirm that there are different types of minds, that we are not trying to fix and make everybody into a neurotypical type of mind and style, that we value this diversity. And I think that and we have that have neurodivergent staff and that have trainings, and I think this is a cultural aspect. So this is on my one of my slides, just some keywords that families can use to look for when they're thinking about an agency. The second goes to what I was saying earlier. I think an integrated agency is important. I would want to find an agency that also has on their staff OTs and speech pathologists and physical therapists and educators Why? Because we all work together and collaborate. Your families have complex individuals in them. And so just straight up mental health training may not be enough to capture all of the complexity of the neurodivergent individual or family before me. I also think you need to think about neurobiologically informed. So agencies that think a lot about the brain, how the brain works, how the structure of the brain is affected with different diagnostic profiles and what that would mean, what it might look like behaviorally upstream. I am a huge believer in trauma-informed work. There are many individuals and scenarios that I have heard about where we can think of relational trauma. What is it like to move through the world when your way of expressing yourself, when your needs are constantly not, you talked about the doctor office just a minute ago, you're constantly, as the caregiver or as the individual, not quite fitting the primary modality of how our world is set up, which is for neurotypical individuals. So I think having a trauma-informed lens on the clinicians is really important. So those are my main, those would be my main, you know, search points. And yes, we will be developing a list of other resources that have these qualities, but I think just your families looking for these kinds of concepts will be a good start.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So many things about what you just said, just as a parent, are so meaningful to me. Just being able to navigate the world and be accepted just as you are, which is so hard. We try to create that sort of environment for our kids, or our adults, as they get older, but it's can be challenging, I mean, and even if you're not neurodivergent, it sometimes can be challenging, to navigate the world, right? So just add that layer onto it, and it does give the entire family a whole nother layer of things to challenge, to be challenged with.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I love that we're creating a list as we go. So thank you, Jeanne, for your insight on that. So let's talk a little bit about the Center for Development of Play and Learning. Where you're the owner and director. And I know you offer different models of for neurodivergent children and their families. Could you tell us a little bit about how these therapies benefit not only the child, or the adult, but the whole family and their caregivers?
Absolutely. Um, so we have at the Center for Developmental Play and Learning three main programs, which is the Early Start program, 0 to 3, and Greta Wright is the director of that program. And there's obviously, it's called Early Birds. It's a very developmental focus. And then we have a program like that, actually there it is on your screen. So then we have Friendship Time, which was our original program, that goes from 0 through the 12th year, and that's the Floor Time program. Also very much the families and parents are involved in that. And then in 2000, I wanted to really start this project we're talking about today of having mental health clinicians that really understood from the ground up the work with neurodivergent individuals, older kids graduating out of our program, getting older, teens, and young adults and parents. So that started about, 4 years ago. So those are the main programs of the agency. But I think to answer your question, if we are working with your child, we are working with the parents as well, no matter, I mean, if it's a grown child living independently, there may be a time for, with that individual's permission to say, hey, would you want your caregiver, your parents to come and have this conversation? But generally, we are working with the parents in tandem with working with the individual. It's never just, bring your kid in, do some this, do some that, and you're on your way. It's very much like a working with the individual within that system. So we would never just, work with the child or the grown child alone. Um, and I think, uh, let's see if you know, there can be for therapy, if you think about it, I think it takes the kind of expertise that I'm talking about. If somebody has a pretty limited language system, they need to understand Gestalt language processing. They need to understand chunking language. They need to understand what a certain phrase or a certain type of expression means. They need to be comfortable with the AAC so that we can take a behavior that the family may be coming to us and going, oh my gosh, make it stop. This is crazy. We need help with this. We're tearing our hair out. And really trying to figure out, well, what is the meaning of this behavior? Totally get the make it stop feeling. I've had it, we've all had it, but we really want to go deeper because this is a communication. And I think that communication involves the whole family. There may be something upstream that we're seeing with this grown child who's breaking stuff at home or being disruptive or really loud. And then we have to kind of be detectives in this very developmental and mental health way to think about what is the meaning of this, because this means something. It always means something. And one of my pet peeves is, I was going to say this later in the talk, but I might as well say it now. I cannot stand it when people say, oh, that's the autism, or oh, that's the ADHD. That really takes away that person's voice and the meaning of that behavior and the meaning of their keen interest. It is not random and it is not about the diagnosis. So I'm very passionate about this, that yes, the diagnosis will sort of point you to a neighborhood and to kind of a constellation of things that we might see, but the particular individual is going to pick a behavior or a way of expressing themselves or a way of protesting that is very significant to them and to the family they're in. And that is my passion and our passion, to support families to better understand what that communication could be, and then to have a conversation about, all right, so it turns out you didn't like going to this event that mom or dad really loves, and the way you protested was to make a disruption over there and get everybody all, and then we're getting somewhere. Now we're getting somewhere because it turns out to have real meaning, and I think the individual feels understood and the family says, oh, we're not in this hamster wheel of meaningless struggles. There's a issue here. So you need therapists that can kind of get to that and interpret and support. And we are passionate about that.
Oh, wow, Jean, you just gave me so much hope. I got to tell you, I'm going to throw a little personal story in there and in here. Lily's out with a caregiver right now. And this morning, she was up last night for 2 to 3 hours before she finally went to sleep. And, this is a thing now. This is a regular thing where she doesn't want to go to bed. And it's obviously taking its toll. It takes their toll on the entire family, right? So I was telling the caregiver this morning about the situation and how, I was just over it. And, I was talking about all the things, right? But then at the end of that conversation, I said, but the hard part for me is I just want to find out, I want to get to why it's happening because it's stressful for her. This is not a deliberate thing that she wants to upset me or the home. She's trying to communicate something. So the challenge is finding what that is. So it just goes right into what you just said. And again, I just applaud that, effort to allow a person to be who they are and to look at it as, more something to help figure out so that it can make the whole family whole, right? So yes, it's a hard thing to go through, but once you figure it out, then it'll be very easy to maybe adjust your plans. So you'll know that person doesn't like to go to that event where we're going to schedule that when we can go by ourselves, right? We will stop trying to put the round into the square, right? So
Right. Plus, I think you're doing something really beautiful. You're maybe giving that person who was protesting in this other way self-awareness. Oh, I guess I really didn't like going there and I acted this way, but now it's like it really helps them define themselves. I'm not someone who likes going to musical concerts. Okay, now I know. Now the next time I hear there's a concert going, I have a way to say, that's not for me in whatever way I say that.
There's something very important about being able to be self-aware and to be able to exercise, sharing that with people, right? Just because someone loves music doesn't mean they want to go to a concert, right? So,
Oh, yeah. And it even goes more than that. I was sitting with a father and son recently, and the father was saying to his son, all right, so you don't like going to this event, and I know you did it and said it this way, but I'm sad. Like it gets more complex. Now I want to tell you, son, I'm sad. I wanted to share this with you. And then I'm supporting the son to go, oh man, dad is really disappointed. And so the son might look at his dad and realize something like, oh, dad has a different mind. He has a different body. He has a different thought. And really sort of, you just watch this unfold where they find each other. They finally find each other instead of, like I said, the hamster wheel of, and it's just so beautiful.
it really is. It really is. Once you have that realization that you're actually having a very real connection and you can let go of a little bit of the control as the parent, as the caregiver, and actually allow some of the space for those feelings and for those explorations. And then it turns into something much more meaningful than, a stressful, wound up, oh, I want to try to avoid that when that happens, right? So and it's easy to fall back into patterns, but I just love that approach. And thank you so much for sharing that. Um, so what would you say to someone who has maybe tried therapy as a family caregiver or a person with a disability and didn't feel understood or that it was right for them? What would you encourage them to try again, or what kinds of things would you suggest?
Trying to think of, above and beyond what we've already spoken about, I guess I would just pick this moment to say, it's going to to emphasize, it's going to come down to the feeling of being understood. That is, I operate from what we call like a psychodynamic, a relational perspective. So I think having a relationship with your therapist where you do feel safe and understood. And I think for parents, what I would say is, I think as caregivers, we're just so, focused, laser beam focused on, helping and supporting. But I think we as parents need a place to just kind of unload and leave some stuff here with the therapist in the office that they just need to sort of, get from their bodies, because this is a long and complex and complicated process to parent a neurodivergent individual. And I love therapy so much because it allows people to maybe say things that they think are ugly, or like they would never say anywhere else, but it's not harming any of their loved ones, and it sort of just releases from that tension that's inside their body to leave it with a trusted person. So I would say don't give up on having that for yourself. The parents and caregivers really may need a safe place to grieve. It's a complicated grief process, to mourn, to celebrate, to feel things that are not so pretty, to feel joy, but it may not feel like others can understand that. So I think that regardless of whether the therapist may have the specialty for your neurodivergent individual, at least for the caregivers, I think there's a lot of work. Again, we're very passionate about supporting the parents at the agency because we know what you've been through. Many of our staff have lived it as well. So yeah, I would say don't give up on that work. And I hope this talk makes people think, oh, maybe therapy has a role as a grown person, as an adult, like to bring in myself and my grown child. Maybe we can keep having conversations, even if it's about, why do you keep ripping up my stuff? Or why don't you want to go to the concert? Or it could be complicated. I don't like the school I'm at. And why did you make me go? And just really, whatever level we're having the conversation, it's really important this idea of rupture and repair. It's not so much that you avoid ruptures in communication, in difference of opinion, but that you have a way to kind of repair it through conversation, through understanding. So, but I always love the parent work. And I think that even maybe before you figure out who you're going to have work with your grown child, make sure you really think about it again for yourselves.
Yeah, I love that too, because it is a very unique journey. It's a challenging one, and you can feel very isolated, very alone in your feelings. And you have, I will say, for me personally, the transition from young adult to now full adult has been it's a different world. Like I used to know all the things to do, and I don't anymore. And that in itself can be very hard to sit with. However, you know, I do choose to look at it more as a growth experience rather than, a negative challenge. But when you're in the midst of all the feelings, it can be very hard and very challenging. And sometimes I do feel like just somebody to talk to about how I'm feeling and to just be, able to say things without fear of judgment or ridicule or, anything like that would be so powerful. So thank you for sharing that, Jeanne. Again, giving us that permission to just be authentically ourselves, right? Yeah, I love that. So
Absolutely.
we're getting to the end of our conversation and we'll be able to take some questions in just a minute. But before we officially end, is there any important part of our conversation today that you would like to just, encourage our viewers to remember and maybe take away and put into action? I mean, you've given us so many great things to think about.
Yeah, Felisa, I'm proud to say I have covered all of I don't know, we wove it in, you and I.
Yeah.
I totally got to everything. So I actually feel that, I hope people will feel hopeful. I end by something Greenspan said, which always tickled me because, he was asked, this is Stanley Greenspan, who one of the co-founders of Floor Time. So someone asked, and he was a psychoanalyst, by the way. I dearly love what he and Serena brought to us. But someone asked him, when do you just feel like, you've gone as far as you're going to go with this developmental work? You've been at this with the language system and the body system and cognitive. When do you stop? And he said something like, about 5 minutes before they expire. Like so his perspective was, which I love for all of us as humans, we're all a work in progress. We're all constantly, like you were just saying, Felisa, we're all evolving. We're at a new phase. Suddenly teenage years are upon us, and all the stuff I used to know about school age stuff is now out the window because they're talking back at me and they're
Yeah.
sassy. Uh,
All
so
the things, yes.
all the things. So yeah, I feel like it was a great summary of everything you inspired me to think about that I wanted to communicate. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having this great conversation. You've definitely given everyone a lot to think about, and I'm so grateful for your perspective. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Future is Now program, and then we'll move into questions and answers. So the Future is Now is designing a support plan for you and your adult family member. It's a 6-week live online class series where caregivers develop a comprehensive future planning guide for the caregiver and adult family member with a disability, all in a small and welcoming environment. Self-Care Matters, Well-Being for the Caregiver is a 2-week live online class series where caregivers learn about special practices and tips, resources, and strategies to improve and sustain their well-being. Future is Now and Self-Care Matter classes are also offered in Spanish. Visit the Caring Futures website at caringfutures.org and join our mailing list to keep up to date with these offerings and register for classes and more. Also, if you want to continue this conversation, then I invite you to join our Caring Futures Facebook group. It's a private group only for family caregivers and is a safe space for us to share our triumphs and challenges. A link to the Facebook group will be posted in the chat right now. And so let's get started with questions. If you have questions, please type them in the Q&A and we'll call on you directly, or we'll answer your question directly. And then if you need ASL interpretation, please raise your hand and we will put you on camera for that. So let's see. Let's get to our questions. We have about 7 questions. And we'll just start rolling right into those. So we have Janet who asks, how do we get our adolescents to be open-minded about therapy after they've reached burnout and no longer want to do therapy because they just don't feel it's helpful?
Oh, yeah, Janet, that's a great question. And I obviously, would need to know a lot more about the situation it's like everything that's led up to the moment where they're saying they're burnout. I mean, I think adolescence in general is it's a time where the brain is undergoing remodeling, and it's also a time where um, from a mental health or from a psychic standpoint, the individual has to kind of shift in their emphasis from the world of the parents and the caregivers, to their peers, to the outer world. They're turning away from that emphasis to the outer world. They're getting ready to, and so there's a rejection of, oh, you want me to do this, you want me to go to this school, you want me to go to this therapy, I'm done, I'm my own person. And I think what I see with neurodivergent individuals is this, oh joy, this goes on longer because I think there's an extra frustration about needing to developmentally as a human do these things, but also the awareness that there's not a full capacity to be more separate from mom, dad, caregivers than they like. I still need help getting dressed. I still need help with this, that, or the other. So there can be an extra frustration that you're picking up on with their struggle for autonomy. And I think it's also a big struggle for us as caregivers. We have been minutely involved in the caregiving, from the brushing of the teeth to the what are you eating to the where are you going, who will be with you. And to have to back ourselves out of that is painful. It's anxiety provoking. We have mixed feelings about it. We kind of want to be done. We're over it, as Felisa said. So, will happen if I'm not there watching at every moment. So I think we need to also think about that. But I would say, I think if an adolescent feels that the therapy is the parent's idea, that they don't see any point in it for themselves, that's where we have to start. Like, we may see the struggle and everything, but the adolescent may just view it as yet another attempt to fix, cure, make me do something. So I don't know whether, that perfectly answers the conversation, but that's what I would be thinking about in the scenario you brought up. That's where I would start thinking.
Thank you, Jean. Next we have, is this webinar about autism only?
I don't think so. I don't
I
think
don't
so.
either.
I
Yeah.
don't view it that way. I think, yes, there are different issues that come up amongst different types of diagnoses or categories, neighborhoods, as I think of them. But I think this touches on, we have individuals here with syndromes, we have many individuals with co-occurring, lots of ADHD, lots of ASD. And so, but I think amongst a wider population, we just have a lot of anxious kids. They're still processing the pandemic. There's a lot of depression. There's a lot of isolation. So even if I'm not thinking about necessarily a set of characteristics about how the person moves through the world, I'm still thinking about these issues and the wider context.
Thank you. Rosa asked, my son was discharged from Cal Luth Community Counseling after 3 years. It was difficult for him to trust a new therapist every year. I've been calling LMFT in the Ventura area with no luck in regards to an adult with developmental challenges and who gets anxious and depressed easily with life changes. I would appreciate a resource list that I could try.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, so we have a small group of therapists in Ventura County. And yes, we will. So we have, there are a few, I have one therapist I'm thinking of who works with individuals like your son. And I think there will be more. I mean, although I don't have a ton of places and people to send you all to, the list is growing. If you search up the search words that you'll get in the slides, neurodiverse affirming and knowledgeable about these issues, you're going to see more and more agencies and therapists with this background. So yeah, stay tuned. There should be more resources coming your way.
okay, great. Thank you. Janet asks, what other services are available for our neurodivergent children aside from traditional therapy? Seems like providers are impacted and having a hard time getting access to therapy and appointments after COVID.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I besides you want to know besides therapy. I mean, I guess I would I would say I would always my philosophy, and this comes from the DIR floor time world, is whatever your child or your teen is passionate about, follow that. So for in the ASD world, we get a little bit, we've been told maybe some messages about perseveration and worried about narrow interests. I say, hey, it's a type of mind. It's a type of mind we need. Go with it. So if your kid loves building Legos or is a gamer or, plug that to what I think is the big antidote to the isolation is connectedness and community. So if you can help guide, your person into what they love, they will feel that you are honoring who they are as a person, and they will also meet other like-minded individuals. And I know this may sound simplistic. I know that probably your situation is, more complex than what I'm saying. But I think so. In our family, it was animals 24/7, animals from day one. And, so now my grown child is, in the world of, zookeeping and learning how to work with bigger animals and bigger animals. And so I think you just have to really, that is actually a powerful mindset for us rather than, and I remember talking to him. He didn't want to have like a liberal arts degree like I had. That was too general. He wanted to specialize in animals. And so once we just said, it's animals, fine, it's animals. And we just kept, helping him get to where he needed to be. It's really been the most successful pathway. But that goes right back to floor time, following the child's interests, letting them lead. So at least before you're looking for that person, find a community of like-minded individuals with similar passions. So that, remember we were talking earlier about this sense of alienation and being in this world not really well set up for your child. But when they're with people of like interests, it's like finding your people, finding your natural habitat. You can breathe, you can enjoy. So
Yeah, and it's a sense of belonging, right? Like you find a place where you belong, and that just in itself is uplifting, right?
mhm.
Um, Rosemary asks, when the child does not want to participate, interact, or protest something, they don't want to do really anything and retreats to self-isolation. Any suggestions for that?
Yeah, again, kind of going back to what we said earlier, there's a lot of communication in that. And so if that's where we're starting, I think the issue would be to find out what is going on, and that may begin with a conversation with someone other than parents. It may be talking to the parents first and then helping you have that conversation with the kind of isolating tween or teen. But I think, we see this a lot. There's a tremendous amount of anxiety and a tremendous amount of worry. I think we want to make sure that this individual has a place to kind of sit with someone who understands what might be going on, and to then bridge and scaffold a conversation. Do you think you're now ready to maybe have that conversation with your parents? Can we have the parent come in? And so we've done years and years of this kind of work, and it's really powerful. It doesn't mean we're all happy hearing all the news, but I think at least we have the information in front of us, and we can start to make things better. So um, I think this what kind of in some of the questions I'm hearing, you tell me if I'm wrong, is this, we have this impulse to help and to get them to do something or get them help. And I think there's a point at which a protest starts to happen about, hey, I don't want you to come and channel me and funnel me into things and have me done to. And so you really might be having a message about that person's agency, what is their voice. And so I tell parents, just get really curious. I know you have to sit on your hands and you have to become really good listeners. You have to manage your anxiety. And that's where a therapist can kind of help get us where we need to go. Because I know we
Yeah, that's a really good point. Because in some situations, as much as you want to interject yourself and help, you have to just kind of step back and wait to be asked, right? And whatever that looks like. And that is where maybe therapy can be really beneficial for us, right? Because we do have a hard time doing that just instinctively because we want to take care of our kids and help them, achieve what they want and help them learn how to communicate their needs, right? Like even that, like is hard because some kids don't know how to do that. And so they retreat and they isolate. And so even teaching them how to do that can be hard. So we have one last question, and that is, how do we pay for this? So are there any, I mean, does your center accept Medi-Cal, or are there any special things that you know of that can help families afford therapy?
Yeah, so our center does accept Medi-Cal, so that's good news. Um, and in the future, not too far from now, there's DIR floor time is going to be covered by commercial insurance, so your private insurance plan. And when I say floor time, you're probably thinking of sitting on the floor with a jack in the box or some blocks. I'm really talking about everything we talked about today. I'm talking about conversations at whatever level. The older kids come into offices like this, the younger kids are, yeah, we have, so there will be funding through commercial insurance coming up. There is funding now through SenCal. We do sliding scale. Um, and I'm trying to think of, yeah, so I think more and more, as I say, more and more practitioners are wanting to be trained in this modality and way of thinking. So I do think there will be ways to make this affordable.
Thank you, Jean, and thanks for clarifying too about floor time and what that actually means. It looks like we've answered all of the questions, and I can't tell you again how much I appreciate taking the time to have this conversation with us. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a great day. See you next time.